A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you for tuning into another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you on board today. We've got a very busy show. We had a very busy weekend, quite frankly, over the weekend. Starting on Saturday night when news broke about a standoff taking place in New York, about 60 miles north of New York City, where a veteran named Alexander Booth involved in a standoff with law enforcement. And there was a lot of confusion about what was taking place here. Social media, including Alexander Booth himself, talking about how this was a seizure, a red flag firearm seizure. And you had individuals who, were showing up there to protect and defend Alexander Booth from this incursion by police. Police say this was not a red flag firearms order. This was actually a felony warrant for burglary related to an earlier incident. We're going to get into this, again, coming up in just a couple of minutes. But Sunday, we had more big news develop. Michael Bloomberg, former New York City mayor, announcing that he is running for president, made it official. He'd been dipping his toes into the water. He had his name put in the Alabama primary. That was the first in the nation filing deadline. And then he came out last week and did a complete 180 on the issue of stop and frisk. He's a guy who just a couple of years ago talked about, one way to, make cities safer is to take these young minority men and to throw them up against the wall and to frisk them, to pat them down for weapons. He said that he doesn't believe that minorities between the ages of 15 and 25 should own firearms. And he's, renounced all of those statements from just a few years ago. But Sunday he did make it official, and he did it so in a very big way with a $31 million ad buy for 1 week's worth of television ads. And that's just the beginning of Bloomberg's push to become president. I can think of nobody else I'd rather talk to about this than Jim Geraghty, who has been covering campaigns for years now with National Review. He joined me just a short time ago to talk about what Michael Bloomberg's entree into the presidential primary process means for gun owners and Americans who like their large sodas and like to, salt their food and maybe like to listen to music on their iPod, what it means for all of us who like the idea of us having individual liberty. Take a look and a listen. Jim, it is always good talking with you. I'll confess right up front, I was surprised to see Michael Bloomberg officially take the plunge and declare his presidency or his candidacy for president on Sunday. I really thought when it came down to it, he wouldn't see a viable path to victory, but I guess never underestimate the power of an egotistical guy with billions of dollars to spend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he is indeed making a splash. You and I, people who listen to you and I, not just on about a week ago, but for years have been here. You and I have enjoyed making fun of Mike Bloomberg, and he deserves every last bit of it. But he's spending, at least according to the New York Times, most recent allocations and all that stuff, $30 million on TV ads in 1 week.
Yeah.
And it is an absolute nationwide buy. He's spending $52,000 in Fargo, North Dakota. And, Cam, you can buy a station for that much. I'm exaggerating slightly. But, Biloxi, Mississippi, right? This isn't just, okay, we're going to throw up some ads on Manchester, New Hampshire, and Des Moines like most presidential campaigns do. He's going coast to coast. This is a demonstration of firepower, so to speak. This is firing all your guns in a 21-gun salute to intimidate the opposition. And it's Thanksgiving week. People are going to be watching football. People are going to be watching the parade. My guess is a lot of people are going to see Mike Bloomberg ads in the next week. And it'll be very interesting to see how Democratic primary voters respond to them.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed is that, I do a lot of internet searches for terms like gun control. And when you search for gun control now, the very first thing that pops up, Mike Bloomberg's campaign website. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's the first response in your Google ads. So it's not just the TV buys as well. But you're right, $31 million. I mean, to put that into perspective, that is more money than a lot of the presidential candidates on the Democratic side raised in the third quarter, right? And that's what he's spending in this initial ad buy. One of the other interesting things that I noted, Jim, is that Bloomberg's the Bloomberg.com, because, he's got his own news network, right? I mean, Michael Bloomberg has his own media empire. Well, apparently the editorial board at Bloomberg.com all stepping aside for the course of the campaign, and they're joining Michael Bloomberg's campaign. So one of the things not only do we have to think of in terms of the billions of dollars that he has available to him to spend as a candidate, but he also has that media platform, which will not be investigating Bloomberg or his other fellow candidates, I guess. But then he's also got Moms Demand Action. He's got Everytown for Gun Safety. How easy is that going to be to turn into a get out the vote effort, given the mailing list and the donors that Bloomberg might already have on file?
Yeah, but I did see an article, Cam, saying from those gun control groups that, yeah, look, just because Mike Bloomberg has been bankrolling them for the last few years, he's going to have to earn their support just like everyone else.
Sure.
It's like, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to have no play in your decision whatsoever.
Right.
Oh, wait, wait, the payroll office closed this week? What's going on? Yeah. So, first of all, I have a smidgen of sympathy for the Bloomberg editors there, because as far as I know, it's not like Donald Trump owned a news organization that all of a sudden had to cope with that. I suppose I don't remember. Forbes magazine was always more of a business-focused magazine, and I know Steve Forbes was a columnist there for a while, but it wasn't primarily focused on politics. But Bloomberg covers a lot of politics, and for those of us who'd want to say, by the way, Bloomberg does have a wide range of columnists. My colleague Ramesh Ponnuru writes a column for them. So, and the regular columnists are going to keep doing what they do. Mm-hmm. But the kind of the staff editorial, the voice of the institution, is going to go quiet. And Cam, you and I probably would say that going back for years, they've always sounded like they were Mike Bloomberg press releases, and now we know they were.
Right.
The campaign staff and the editorial staff are the same people. They just take off one hat and they put on another one, and that changes everything. I think the Bloomberg News organization is handling this about as well as they can. I do think it's a little bit weird that they're saying, well, we're going to continue to investigate the president.
Right.
But we promise we're not going to investigate any of the Democratic rivals, which, again, if you're Cory Booker here, if Bloomberg suddenly does this big, in-depth, here's the dark side of Cory Booker, you could understandably say, hey, wait a minute, you all collect paychecks from another one of the candidates. So yeah, they're in a tough spot. I think this is probably about as good a solution as they could possibly work up. Because I believe at one point, like Bloomberg kind of idly speculated simply shutting down Bloomberg News for the duration of the campaign. Which, by the way, you want to talk about your job? If one of the reasons people should elect you is your record as a job creator. I fired my entire news organization just so I could run, would not really warm people up. We're
they'd probably give them all jobs like testing the size of soda cups, or
There you go, like right? That, or hey, quick, keep streaming the stock prices at the bottom of the screen, something like that.
Right.
It's an unusual situation. My guess is, and when I wrote about today's Morning Jolt newsletter, is on paper, Mike Bloomberg is a terrible candidate, not just for pro-gun guys like you and me, but even by the standards of Democrats. And we can go down the whole list of up against the wall and spread them. He's got a Me Too problem going back to his, pre-mayoral days. Many, Democrats like to drink large sodas too. All kinds of, New York. The idea that in the 2020 the choice could be which New York billionaire do you like better, America? There are a whole bunch of reasons that Mike Bloomberg is not a perfect fit for the Democratic Party as it approaches 2020. On paper, he should flop, but. You knew that belt was coming. Mm-hmm. Tom Steyer, right, who is also a diminutive billionaire, who is a vortex from which no charisma can possibly escape, is another liberal billionaire running for the Democratic nomination. He's decided this is how he wants to spend his fortune, and he made the last two debates. I mentioned this because nobody remembers him because he didn't make a huge impression in either of those debates, but he's there. And you look at the most recent polls in not Iowa, but in New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. Steyer's at 5% in all of those, right?
Wow.
Now think about it. Tom Steyer's got no career in politics before that. He's been, a billionaire underwriting liberal causes for a long time. For a long time was climate change, and he was pro-impeachment and all that kind of stuff. But basically running TV ads saying, I'm Tom Steyer and I'm running for president, and I really, the president's got to be impeached, and I can't say that was enough to get him to 5%. Now, and that was by a spending that was small. I'm making air quotes as I say that, compared to what Mike Bloomberg is doing this week. I mean, it's not just the $30 billion this week. It's that if he wants to, he can spend another 30 next week.
Right, exactly.
And he can spend another 30 the week after that. Like, and first of all, I don't know about you. At some point, local television stations in places like Des Moines, Iowa, and Manchester, New Hampshire, they're going to build a Scrooge McDuck money bin. Every ad spot at every hour of the day on every program is bought out by the Bloomberg campaign.
The sales manager is going to be like Oprah to the sales staff. You get a new car, and you get a new car. Yeah, I know, and it is. I mean, you're right. But what's fascinating about this is, so you talk about the money that he has available to him. From what I understand, he's not accepting donations. Yeah. Which means that, you talk about Tom Steyer being on the debate stage. Well, the qualifications for at least the next few debates going forward is that you have to have X number of donors. Bloomberg's saying, I don't want any donors. I'm going to self-fund. Mm-hmm. So we won't see him on the debate stage.
Unless at some point the DN, if he gets, let's say 10, 15%, let's say, a sizable part, I could imagine a scenario where the Democratic National Committee says, okay, we're taking away that qualification for the debate. This would, outrage a whole bunch of people, but it would seem kind of silly to not have a major candidate already attracting significant support up on that stage. But the other thing is that he's saying he's not going to take a salary as a candidate. And there are a lot of people whose first instinct is, hey, that's good for him. All right. Something made the observation, and by the way, it's worth noting for the entirety of his presidency, Donald Trump has not really collected a paycheck. Mm-hmm. Every quarter, he donates what he would get paid as president to some worthy cause somewhere. On paper, it looks pretty good. You're like, oh, okay, I like that. But it also says, hey, taxpayers, I'm not accountable to you. I don't owe you anything. I'm not your employee. I'm in this office, and while I could still be fired by the impeachment process or by being voted out of office, there's a certain value, symbolic value in the idea of elected officials taking a paycheck, right? It's a reminder you work for us. You don't work for yourself.
Yeah.
And also, it's interesting because what do people complain about? All these politicians, they're de facto servants of their big donors and stuff like that. And now we've got billionaires running for office. And maybe some people aren't 100% sure that they like that idea, that the billionaires – let's also observe, Cam. Look, by the time you have $1 billion, you're probably a very, very successful businessman. And most of the people you encounter on a day-to-day basis either work for you or they want something from you, a grant, a charitable donation, a favor, something like that. So I'm going to go on. Again, I would love to experience this myself, Cam, to see if this is true. But I guess being a billionaire does not make you a more naturally empathetic and understanding person. And I'm sure there are kind, easygoing billionaires out there. But most of the billionaires in American politics we've encountered tend to be a little bit of a narcissist, tend to be a little bit of my way or the highway. I've made $1 billion. I am a genius. And every idea that comes out of my mouth is a golden one. Right? It's hard enough to say to your boss when they're not a billionaire, boss, I know you love this idea, but I just don't think it's going to work.
Why does I have cyber trucks just driving through my brain right now as you're talking about this? For some reason.
I mean, if you want to put that in the next Transformer movie, yes, that'll look awesome, right? But otherwise, But yeah, and so my sense is that, with all the personality, the warm, easygoing, friendly, and understanding Mike Bloomberg that you and I have been watching for years, Cam, my guess is we'll get to see a bit of that on the campaign trail. And boy, like on the one hand, he should flop. On the other hand, he got himself elected mayor 3 times in a row by spending about $138 a campaign per vote per campaign. And, I don't know. I don't think he'll get the nomination, but he can have a much bigger splash than anybody. People are scoffing, and I'm not sure you can scoff that much money.
And that's the thing. I mean, I too look at the state of the Democratic Party right now, and he clearly wants to try to muscle Biden out of the way and try to seize that moderate lane. I don't know how many people see Mike Bloomberg as moderate. To me, he comes off as a pro-billionaire Democrat. And I don't think there's much daylight between Mike Bloomberg and every other candidate on gun control, for instance. I mean, he certainly bankrolled the gun control movement, but as far as their positions go, I don't think Mike Bloomberg is actually going to stand out compared to Elizabeth Warren. I think, that fight is going to be over capitalism. And over, whether or not billionaires are good or bad. And frankly, Jim, I don't think Mike Bloomberg makes the best example of a great billionaire. I kind of
make billionaires great again, Cam.
Right, and if I'm Elizabeth Warren, I'm kind of salivating right now because I can't wait to go use Mike Bloomberg as a punching bag. And yes, he's going to hit you back hard, and yes, he's going to be able to outspend you. But again, you're right. I don't know how sympathetic a candidate Bloomberg is going to be. But having said that, again, he's not a dumb guy. And while his ego may be the size of the tri-state area, I don't think he's interested in getting in to embarrass himself. And so I assume that, his advisors have been telling him, look, even though the polling so far has been mediocre, it's because you haven't spent a lot of money. Come in with a big splash, introduce yourself to the American people, show them you're not the boogeyman that people like Cam Edwards says that you are, and we'll see what happens after that. And so I think we do have to wait and see. I mean, when do you think we'll have a good idea as to what kind of entrance and what kind of floor Bloomberg has as a candidate now that he's actively campaigning for president?
Pretty darn soon. The first voting goes on in Iowa caucuses February 1st. So my guess is the campaigns a lot of campaigns will be kind of desperate in the month of December. But one of the great ironies is as we pushed up our caucuses and primaries, I don't know how engaged people are in December, right? Holidays are coming up. They're out gift shopping. They got, NFL football play end of the season. There's other stuff going on in people's lives in the month of December. My guess is January is when, quote unquote, the race will really begin. And we have one more debate in December, one more debate in January. You'll probably see more kind of impromptu candidate forums that are not debates, but they may, you'll probably see the elbows get a little sharper, maybe some attack ads going back. That's the other thing is that everything we're seeing right now is, Mike Bloomberg, the America's CEO, or some sort of, happy talk.
Right.
But if he decides, Elizabeth Warren is that, fake Native American who sent her kids to private school and doesn't know how to make her plan work, and she's a giant phony on every front, he can do that. And my guess is that stuff would tear down some of these numbers. If he wants to put together a loop of Joe Biden senior moments, he can do that. This is a media power that most Democrats have not really had to deal with. And, I'm sure somewhere in the White House, you're going to hear uproarious laughter. Because Mike Bloomberg, again, it's very tough to see him getting the nomination, but he can make it much tougher for anybody else. And that, maybe he becomes a kingmaker. And that's kind of an interesting position to be in. And I could also see, as you said, a whole lot of Democrats not liking the fact that the 11th richest man in the country is coming in and basically, exerting an enormous amount of power over this process.
Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out over the next week or so. But I think my quick take yesterday at Bearing Arms was there are literally billions of reasons for gun owners to take this campaign seriously. And so as much as we might roll our eyes and as much as we might not see a lane for Mike Bloomberg, I don't think that we can just simply laugh this off. Do you?
Mm-hmm. No, and the other thing is that you and I believe, in addition to being the right position, that ultimately the pro-Second Amendment, private rights of gun owners position is a popular one. That when you really hold an election on this, undoubtedly, this is a big factor in why President Trump won states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and places like that, and Ohio and Iowa. That this is, not only are we right, this is also a popular position, and that every time you have, somebody who runs on gun control, they find out that the support is a mile wide and an inch deep. That people don't actually vote on it, right? That this isn't really a giant motivating factor for voters. They worry about other issues like the economy a great deal. Well, this is the ability to throw $30 million a week into any particular cause he wants can make Mike Bloomberg appear a lot more popular than he is, right? And that he can do the same thing for the causes he believes in. So I think one of the things is a guy whose name has now become synonymous with gun control can run and can get a whole lot of traction by spending, gobs of money. And for those of us who support the Second Amendment, that's a little unnerving. That he could move the ball in the right direction. And this is at a time when we've also seen, as you and I discussed a few weeks ago, the Virginia elections went really bad for us. We've had a whole bunch of races that have not gone the way we've wanted, despite what we believe is a, pretty darn popular position. So it is something to keep an eye on for gun owners and Second Amendment advocates. And, we will see. I guess maybe the other thing we should fear about is, God forbid, you get somebody who has all of Bloomberg's positions and all of Bloomberg's outlook on life, but who's a nicer human being. And who's also a billionaire, right? I mean, like he's a thoroughly unappealing figure in a whole bunch of different ways. But, you could take that. It was my same thing towards the perspective of Sanders. And maybe you could argue that, Bernie Sanders looks like the guy from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David, right? And he's kind of goofy looking and he kind of shouts all his speeches and all kind of stuff. But at some point, somebody was going to come along with the same message who was a more appealing messenger. Then you could argue whether Elizabeth Warren is it, but packaging matters. But at some point, these bad ideas can get a more pleasant package and slip in under the radar.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's my cheery thought for Monday.
Well, wait, I appreciate you ending on an optimistic note, Jim. Thank you as always, sir.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Now you know how the turkeys feel. Listen, I do appreciate you coming on the program, and do have a very happy Thanksgiving. My best to you and your family, and we'll talk again very soon. I have a feeling we'll be talking much more about Michael Bloomberg in the days and weeks to come. But let's talk a little bit about what happened in New York State on Saturday evening. This is coverage from the Lower Hudson Valley.com. And again, talking about Alexander Booth, who is a veteran of the Iraq conflict. And again, there's a great dispute over what happened on Saturday. Booth claimed on social media that a coworker of his had called police, said that he was concerned about Booth's PTSD, said he had a 30-round magazine, said the police had come to his home to take his firearms, and that was why he had locked himself inside his home. Police say, no, that's not the case, that there was no red flag firearm order, that this was related to, they said officers showed up at the house about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a earlier incident, at a warrant for burglary and some other misdemeanor charges, that Booth was agitated and then locked himself in the house, and then 7 hours later came out peacefully. During that time, police say that Booth was egged on by people on social media who were, telling him, hey, don't give up without a fight, resist this, fight the redcoats. And again, we don't know exactly what happened. I think that we will learn exactly what happened through Freedom of Information Act requests, through conversations with Booth's attorney, if and when he gets one. He has been arraigned. But again, no firearm-related charges, according to the local sheriff's department, and no red flag firearms seizure order, according to the sheriff's department, which would both be a matter of public record. The charges that he's facing, whether or not there was a red flag petition, that would be something that the press could find out. And so if it's not there, then it didn't happen. I was honestly impressed and energized by the fast response that we saw on Saturday, with people who were coming to what they thought was Booth's defense. I was also a little, I wasn't surprised, because it's just the way that media operates, but I was a little concerned by the fact that we didn't have any confirmed knowledge about what was taking place. And, when you see somebody who's live streaming, you want to take him at face value, right? And I think that, it is perhaps only human to side with this a veteran who's talking about, government overreach and government wanting to come and seize his firearms. But the bottom line is, we don't know what exactly sparked this. We know what police are saying. We know what Alexander Booth is saying. But it's going to take some time to sort out, I think, fact from fiction. And even now, I don't think we have all of the answers, although that I will tell you we're working to try to get some more answers here. So again, I think that there were some positive takeaways from what happened. I think that there were obviously some troubling takeaways, including, again, we can talk about the police response I know that there were folks talking about the APC that was brought up by the SWAT team and the sort of, over-policing from or for a guy who police said was in a mental health crisis. We can certainly talk about that too. But I think for the moment, unfortunately, we still have more questions than answers about what happened this weekend. All right, let's get to a couple of other stories, including our armed citizen story of the day, our good deed of the day, and our recidivism report from Detroit, Michigan, where we're learning about the suspect in a crime that took the life of Rasheen McClain, who was killed Wednesday night, according to Channel 4 in Detroit, when a man opened fire on him. Police now say that that man was not aiming for Officer McClain, but was in fact after a 16-year-old girl. Yeah. Channel 4 in Detroit says the alleged gunman has a criminal past that dates back to 2008, when he was convicted and sentenced to probation at the age of 14 for a home invasion. In 2011, he went on trial for assault with intent to murder, as well as armed robbery and carjacking charges. He escaped conviction on those charges, was convicted on felony firearms charges. That same year, 2011, at the age of 20, Click on Detroit reports he was convicted of assault with intent to do great bodily harm, served 8 years in prison, was released in March of this year. Police say a 16-year-old girl said she was being stalked by the suspect 2 weeks ago when he reportedly shot up her family's home on the west side of Detroit. She told police allegedly everything she knew about him. James Craig, Detroit police chief, says that he has launched an internal investigation because his officers failed to act. Craig said if his officers had seen that he was on parole, he would have been arrested. And the suspect in this case, believed to also be responsible for 3 other shootings that left 6 people wounded and a individual dead, Dantes Calhoun. He's expected to be charged this week. Meanwhile, funeral arrangements for Rasheen McClain, Detroit police officer, will take place this week as well. On to today's armed citizen story from South Carolina, where police are looking for a home invasion suspect. And thankfully, this woman, the victim in this case, was able to protect herself. This was Thursday in Taylors, South Carolina. Deputies say it was broad daylight, about 10 o'clock in the morning. Gentleman walks up to the door. You see the ring doorbell there. And asked the woman inside if she had jumper cables. She says no. He leaves, tries to hit up several other houses, then comes back to her house. And then he forced his way inside, grabbed her by the neck, threw her down, according to authorities. She had a pistol, and when she drew it, the man took off running. Yeah. So, again, like the vast majority of defensive gun uses, the trigger was not pulled, but the crime stopped as soon as the bad guy became aware that this woman was not a helpless victim, but was instead an armed citizen. So no arrests have been made. Thankfully, the woman is okay because she was able to protect herself. And I got to tell you, there are some armed citizen stories where maybe you think, all right, well, maybe it'd be okay even if they hadn't had a gun to protect themselves. Who knows where this story would have ended up had this woman not been able to protect herself with her legally owned firearm. Finally, on to our good deed of the day today from Delmar, Maryland, where a good Samaritan came to the aid of a family whose apartment was on fire, not only able to get them out of that blaze, but actually help put out the fire as well. Delmar, Maryland, as you can imagine, is actually on the border between Maryland and Delaware. It was about 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon when a gentleman was driving by and noticed that there was a fire on a porch on a second floor apartment. So Brandon Campbell, that's the guy's name, stopped his car, ran over, alerted the tenants inside, hey, you got a fire up there, was able to help 2 children and 2 adults get out of the apartment, and then actually was able to extinguish that blaze using water from the first floor apartment. When a volunteer fire department arrived a couple minutes later, they were able to make sure that everything was out. About $5,000 worth of damage done, so not a total loss by any means. Authorities say they believe it was a discarded cigarette that actually started that blaze. But again, thanks to Brandon Campbell in the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing, nobody injured at all. So, Brandon, we thank you for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I am going to continue to try to get more information out of Putnam County, New York, on the situation with Alexander Booth. We hopefully will be able to provide you with more information tomorrow, either here at Bearing Arms Cam and Company or on bearingarms.com. We appreciate you watching, you listening, you spreading the word. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page. You can also become a VIP member of bearingarms.com and get exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. You can do that at bearingarms.com. Thanks again for tuning in to this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information.